So back in the early 80s, there was this woman named inspəʻrāSHən, and she made this song that was called Forget-Me-Nots, and it had a really catchy kind of bass line going to it, and the whole premise of the song was she was sending this guy flowers because she wanted him to remember her. It's actually pretty catchy. There's a link below if you'd like to give it a listen. Then in the late 90s, this guy named Will Smith comes along, and he takes that old song, and he kind of tweaks it a little, and makes the whole song about how they won't let you remember. It's the Men in Black song. Yay for the 90s! I love it when I see that kind of inspired work, where someone is able to take something that's already really cool and flip it on its head or twist it or turn it. I put a link down to that one as well. The thing about inspiration and creativity is that it's really messy. Sometimes you will have an idea that comes to you out of the blue and you'll go, wow, I have no idea why I thought of that or how I thought about that. And sometimes you get inspiration from other people's work. You see something and it triggers something inside of you and you want to do something like that but kind of different, something that is more you. Or you see something and you go, wow, if I just twisted this and tweaked this, I could make something really cool. The concept of inspiration starts to get even messier when you start applying it to things like the Christian scriptures. The Christian scriptures were put together by quite a few people over a pretty long period of time. So you end up with this patchwork quilt of all these poems and stories and histories and letters of advice. These stories still have the power to convict and encourage people to mature and to become better humans. Now, one way to think about biblical inspiration is to say it was completely man-made. That when a story was told around the campfire or a poem was written down, that it came entirely from the mind and heart of the person who was writing it, that there was no outside influence, or whatever outside influence there was, it was just another human being. This view of biblical inspiration denies any involvement from any supernatural being, any divinity, any divine energy, God, whatever you want to call it. Another way to look at biblical inspiration is to remove the human out of the equation completely. This view is very common within Christian circles, and it stops just short of a whole King James Bible floating intact and whole out of the heavens. Now, if you take this view where the divine completely inspired everything that was written, you end up with this weird sort of image where you've got like an angel whispering into someone's ear and their brain is turned off and they're like drooling and they're just writing everything that's said. There's no will in there at all. Zombies. Or a picture of like a marionette puppet where they have strings attached to their hand and they're just writing whatever, God decides to manipulate them to write. But what if it's neither? Or both? What if the creative juices that flowed to create these poems and these stories and these letters of advice were actually some messy combination of both divine inspiration and the writer's own brilliant mind? In fact, I would go as far to say that the scriptures themselves support this idea. In the Christian scriptures, we see all over the place in the stories themselves about how God entrusts humans to do and create and to teach, even though we screw things up all the time. For example, there's this poem in the beginning of the Bible that goes, "In the beginning God created." I'm pretty sure you've heard of it, but in case you haven't, it's pretty much the very first thing you read when you open up the Bible. The ruling empire at the time was Babylon, and Babylon had this epic, gruesome, crazy poem that was really long that they would recite all the time. And it was basically the party line on why and how creation exists and how humans are supposed to be the slaves of the gods and how chaos reigns. And this Israelite slave comes along and takes that poem and flips it on its head in this creative genius act of subversion. He creates a poem that says, no, this is why creation was made. And no, humans are not the slaves of the gods. God created humans out of love. I actually did a video on Genesis 1 earlier. The link is below. Now, when you look at what that person did, you can't help but be bowled over by how brilliant it was. You could say that that person was brilliant and that God was not involved at all. Or you could say that it was divine intervention and that poem arrived in that person's mind complete and all they had to do was write it down. Or maybe we could just be open to the possibility that it was both. Maybe God's spirit nudged that person's creative juices and then they came up with something that was brilliant and clever and beautiful. A few years ago, I watched a TED Talk by Elizabeth Gilbert on creative genius. If you have the time, you should really watch the whole thing. The link's below with all the others. And if you don't have time to watch the whole 20 minutes, at least watch from about the 6-minute mark to the 10-minute mark. She speaks to the idea that creative genius, moments of inspiration are saturated with divine other. That when the human and the mysterious other dance together for one brief moment, that the outcome is more than what that human could have produced on their own. And I honestly think that this happens all the time. I guess what I'm saying is that we need to hold our idea of inspiration gently. Some of us need to be open to there being something else out there. Call it God, call it divine energy, but something outside of ourselves that works with us and inspires us. And some of us need to let go of our fear that if somehow God did not inspire the Bible word for word, that it'll lose its power to transform and encourage and convict and speak truth into our lives. When all is said and done, I come back to the fact that I am limited in my understanding and ability. And yet somehow, something that was written by other limited human beings has the power to compel me to become a better person, to love more, and to be more generous and kind and forgiving. And regardless of what inspired these stories, I think that's pretty cool. Thanks for watching. If you are on the YouTube channel, please subscribe, or you can go over to tangledfaith.com and there's an RSS feed there and a lot more content, and hit the like button if you liked it. Thanks. Bye.